It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview the Indianapolis Colts guest relations, Lindsey Rousseau. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks so much for asking me to be on your sports talk show. I love what I do, and I'm so excited to get to share that with your fan base.
Thank you. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to work in professional sports?
Oh, that's an awesome question. So I grew up around sports. My dad and I have actually watched like Colts football games since as long as I can remember. Actually, one of my very first football memories was when the Colts won the AFC Championship in 2006 and beat the Patriots and went on to win the Super Bowl. But that game was like the first Colts memory I really have in my head. And from there on out, I was really just surrounded by sports in general, but very specifically Colts football. And so when I was getting to the point of having to like figure out what do I want to do with my life, sports was just something I was naturally drawn to. And it has been the best decision I ever could have made for myself. I love what I do.
What was it like working in training camp in the NFL?
Yeah, so my first season, so I guess I'll explain a little bit about the positions that I've held then. So my first season with the Colts, which was in 2019, I worked with their events department. I worked as a seasonal events intern, so I worked training camp and game day. It was so much fun. I got to help out with the interactive parts of training camp. The Colts put on a fantastic show for their fan base. It's a completely free event for Colts fans to attend in just north of Indianapolis in Westfield, Indiana. And they have like so many fun things for like kids to get into, as well as like stuff for anybody that's interested in football. Even if you're not interested in football, it's just like a lot of fun stuff to be part of. It's a way we really like to give back to our fan base. It's like I said, it was a totally free event that they could go to, and that was almost every single one of the training camp practices that they had back in 2019. So that was so much fun to be a part of. And then with that, I also helped out with some other special events that they had during the summer. So I helped out with some events that they were partnering with the 500 festival around the Indianapolis 500 time, as well as I helped out with some junior cheer events, just different things here and there I helped out with and whatnot. And then definitely my favorite thing was getting to work game days. Still to this day, working game days is my favorite part of working in sports. It's so much fun to get to be a part of the game days. It really does feel like you're with your family. At least that's how it feels being around Colts fans. So it's been a lot of fun to get to be a part of that.
Whenever you were working in the training camp, did you get to meet like players like Phillip Rivers and of course Pete Pittman, Michael Pittman?
Yeah, good question. So that was the year before they got so the year I worked training camp was the year before they came in, and I didn't really necessarily get to meet them like that often, but I did get to eat like in the cafeteria with them around the same like lunchtime, so I would run into them and it was pretty cool. But we didn't really have like lengthy conversations because it's like training camp is very much focus mode. But it was really cool. The last day of training camp was actually super awesome. They had a bunch of Colts alumni come in. And so our staff was divided into two lunch shifts. I was on the first shift, so I got to see a couple of really cool old Colts players. And actually, I got to see Bill Polian, which was really cool. But then the second group, they got to see like Peyton Manning and all of those big guys. They were all eating lunch together. I don't think they all like talked to them or anything like that, but they got to be a part of all the things that were going on that day with that. So it was pretty cool.
What is your time like as a guest relations for the Colts?
So can you say that again? Sorry.
What do you do as a guest relations for the Indianapolis Colts?
Yeah, great question. So this year I've had the opportunity to work as a guest relations intern. So it's a game day only position. So I guess it's not actively happening at this moment, but I did work all last season on game days. Usually that job adds like a couple of other things than what I did this year. But because of COVID, a lot of the things that I would normally do in that position were kind of restricted. Like for instance, usually the guest relations people will help with if for some reason they're having special events pre-game, post-game on the field, that sort of stuff. Couldn't really do that this year because like outside of like the players and refs, people weren't really allowed to be out on the field at all. So that, I guess that's one example. But mainly this year, my main focus was to help people with mobile ticketing issues if they had that, as well as just helping create a really fantastic environment for all fans coming into Lucas Oil Stadium.
What is a typical game day like for guest relations?
Yeah, that's a good question too. It's a lot of fun. So for me, I usually show up to the stadium 2 hours, no, 2 hours before they open their gates, and they open up their gates 2 hours before kickoff. So I'm usually there about 4 hours before the game actually starts. We have to go to the ticketing office inside of the stadium, and we have these iPads that we use to help people if they have any sort of mobile ticketing issues, which I will say I was very impressed with all the fans that came into the stadium this year. They really did a great job of learning how to use the mobile ticketing and whatnot. Um, but yeah, we use those iPads for that sort of thing. And then we go to our stations, and usually around that time is when the gates would open, and then we start helping fans come in. It's not a lot of helping people. It is all about helping people, but especially towards the end of the season, people were really getting the hang of mobile tickets and everything like that. So most of my job, once the gates would open, is more of like interacting with families and like guests and people excited to come to the football games. And then, so this season, because we were restricted capacity wise, like how many people were allowed inside the stadium. My job was done at the end of the first quarter, and then I got to go home afterwards. That was a little bit different than how it was when I worked in the events department. So when I worked in events, I would show up like if it's a 1 o'clock game, we would have to be there at 7 a.m. To set up all of the pre-game stuff that goes on outside of the stadium before the game starts, as well as helping out with like in-game promotions and things like that. And that was a ton of fun. So yeah, that's kind of what game days look like from both perspectives of what I've done with the Colts.
Of course, whenever you're finished the day and while the game is still going on, do you get to like, let's say like if you finish during the first half, do you get to stay during the rest of the game to watch, of course, the players finish the game out?
Yeah, so when I worked in events, we were allowed to do that. There wasn't really like extra seating in the stadium, but we had a location where we could watch the game or we could watch it throughout the stadium, which was pretty nice. Last season, since we were so limited on capacity, like I think the maximum amount of fans that we brought in for one game was like 12,000, whereas a typical game day has over 60,000 people in the stadium. So we didn't really have a lot of open seats. So I unfortunately wasn't able to stay for the games this season, but COVID protocols.
What is something that you learned now that you didn't know beforehand starting as a guest relations?
have learned a lot in the last 2 years working with the Colts. I think something that I have really come to appreciate and learn about like the Colts organization in itself is kind of what I was touching on earlier, is that Colts Nation really does feel like a family. It's so cool getting to be with people that have been so invested in the Colts for so long. We have such a loyal fan base. Last season, so not this year working in guest relations, but when I was with the events department, I was at a station where I was interacting with a lot of fans, and I would just have conversations with them and see how their game days are going. And there are so many people who have been season ticket holders since the Colts moved to Indianapolis. And so it's really cool getting to hear their stories. And it's also really cool hearing people's experiences that are experiencing Colts game days for the first time. So it's a lot of fun, for sure.
What advice would you give upcoming future people looking to get into game relations in the NFL?
Yeah, that's a good question too. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Networking truly is everything working in the sports industry. And so it's something as small as even reaching out to somebody on LinkedIn and saying, hey, you really inspire me, keep doing you. Or if you're wanting to learn more about what that specific person does, don't be afraid to send them a message and be like, hey, I would love to get to know a little bit more about you and what you do and how you got where you are today. Is there any chance that we could chat via Zoom or phone call, something like that? So that's my biggest tip. Networking is everything in the industry. And also just be yourself. I know that's a lot easier said than done, but at the end of the day, I feel like I have been able to get where I am today because I haven't been afraid to be myself and allow myself to just be in my natural habitat, being around Colts football. And so I think that's something really important too when people are looking to work in sports, is they just need to go out there and be themselves, and everything will kind of fall into place.
That's wonderful advice. Where can my listeners find you at on social media?
Yeah, so I'm available on, well, I guess I talked about LinkedIn right there. My LinkedIn is Lindsey Rousseau. So you should be able to find me from there. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram. My Twitter and my Twitter and Instagram names are Lenny_Sue17. So that's kind of where they can find me there. My nickname's Lenny. Most of the time people call me Lenny, but I go by Lindsay or Lenny. Whatever people want to call me is cool. But yeah, that's where they can reach me.
Thank you again, Lindsay, for your interview, and best of luck in your future with the Indianapolis Colts as the guest relations.
Yeah, thank you.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Lindsay, for your interview, and best of luck.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.